So now that we have understood what is the main target and goal of sensor fusion in eHealth, I think that it's quite important to underline a very big mistake that has been done when we talk about sensor fusion. And actually, the big mistake is confusing sensor fusion with sensor integration. I put a slide only on this because, believe me, especially in the non-academic world, a lot of companies sell their product, eHealth product, talking about sensor fusion, but at the end of the day, what they do is actually no more of sensor integration. As we will see later, really sensor fusion platform are basically not available nowadays. I want to say that they're not available as overall, but 90% of companies that talk about themselves as sensor fusion service provider don't do this. They do sensor integration. And here on the slide, you can have a really simple example using two sensors, namely an oximeter and an ECG. What can be a sensor integration approach and what can be a sensor fusion approach. The example is really trivial and is far from being something that is realistic. But the message here was the following. Sensor integration is a necessary step for sensor fusion, but it's not sufficient. It's not sufficient to have a platform, an IoT platform that is able to collect the stream of data of many sensors to have a fusion of the information. What is necessary to have a sensor fusion platform is to combine the data, the different stream of data of the sensor, in order to produce a higher level information. So these sensor fusion systems are actually not existing nowadays, at least on a commercial and in a large scale. Sensor integration systems are actually the technological baseline through what we can provide perform sensor fusion in the eHealth environment. So what is a sensor fusion system? A sensor fusion system is actually a combination of what we call a WBAN, so a wireless body area network, and a cloud service. Basically, what is happening here is that through the wireless body area network, which is constituted of the network of all the sensors, we collect all the information coming from that human body, basically to that patient. And this can be wearable sensor, but can be not wearable sensor, like environmental sensor, for example. So at this level, we collect all the information, and then we send all this information to a cloud service, which then communicate with all the rest of the world. So if we zoom a bit more specifically, what is happening, we can distinguish actually three levels. One is the tier 1, which is actually the wireless body area network, the network of the sensor. We have a tier 2, which is basically the first station where all the data coming from the sensor are sent. For example, if you have a smartwatch, in that case, the smartwatch is the tier 1, which has all the sensor, and usually through Bluetooth is connected to your telephone, which is the tier 2. And the tier 2 actually is the one delegated to communicate with the cloud. So send all the data, or at least a part of it, to the cloud, and then through with another service, you communicate, for example, with your doctor or with an emergency. So nowadays this is not happening, but theoretically this could happen in a really close near future. So this is a sensor integration system. If you see this structure, we can actually provide a sensor fusion in all these three levels. So imagine a particular scenario where we send all the raw data to your tier 2, to your phone, and in the phone we do a kind of sensor fusion. In that case, we will see a distributed architecture. And this is actually what we want to do nowadays. So we process all the raw data here, basically, and we send to the cloud just some higher level information, because sending all the data could be kind of energy and network demanding. If the sensor fusion occur on a cloud, we will have what we call this centralized structure. So we send all the data to this cloud. This has a kind of sensor fusion algorithm that run on it, and then he will send an answer back to the phone and to the medical provider. And so this is just to kind of decline what we have seen a bit in a theoretical way before with sensor fusion in this particular environment, in a eHealth actually environment. If we want to see now what are the main sensor integration systems realized so far nowadays, we can state as a general consideration that eHealth sensor integration systems and services are really quite recent. eHealth market is recent, of course, but this particular branch is literally newer than all the other branches developed so far. Anyway, focus on the services, we can say that since the markets and the technology is quite a novelty, the market nowadays is quite fragmented. So we have different companies that can offer different type of services at different level and with a different type of integration and different level of sensor fusion. Again, as a general rule, as we said before, sensor integration is completely different from sensor fusion, and we can say with a really, really good confidence that sensor fusion is at the level we studied on the previous part of the lecture, is basically provided by no one of the services existing today, or a really, really few percentage. So this is something to take into account. There is a huge development to do in this area. Anyway, the main player are basically three, and the main services are basically three. We have the Fitbit Cloud, realized by Fitbit in partnership with Google. We have the eHealth Labs Cloud, which is realized by the eHealth Labs, and Apple, that has the Apple Health Service. So then what is the peculiarity of such services? Such services with different type of target, with different type of sensor and a different level, integrate proprietary devices, so sensor that the company itself develop, and this is the main novelty, even third-party devices. Let's think about, for example, the Apple Health Service. They integrate the Apple Watch, but also they integrate some other type of sensor in order to realize more advanced health monitoring of the user. And in here on the bottom of the slide, in the left part, we can see, for example, the eHealth clouds. So the cloud provided by eHealth, eHealth Labs, and most of the integration here are proprietary devices. So you can see, for example, the sensor realized by the company itself that are tracked in this system. On the right part of the slide, I would like to point out a really, really interesting project, which is, I think, one of the first first services that try to put sensor integration in a larger scale. And this project is called P2 Health. It's mostly realized by the University of Rostock. And actually what they do is elaborating a kind of protocol of different levels. We should be able to integrate not only sensors, but also different integrators, so different mDCS. So this project, you can see the paper posted here, is, in my opinion, really, really interesting, because if we want to really provide eHealth services and sensor fusion, based on sensor fusion, we can't rely on a particular system provided by only one player. So I would say, if you're interested, go look at this, because this is really, really interesting from the point of the evolution of sensor integration and sensor fusion. If we try to have an higher level point of view, we can see actually a bigger picture of this whole ecosystem, this whole structure that actually allow to realize what is called the sensor integration and then the sensor fusion. So here I would like to spend some few words on the subject and the stakeholders involved in this process. So using our tier system, we can see that actually the subject involved are basically of 5 types. We have 2 actually customer, which is the user and the care provider, and then we have the what we can call the service provider, which is actually the one identified with the yellow boxes. So on the tier 1, the first service provider is the sensors manufacturer. So the one that develop the sensors or the electronic, basically. We have a lot of examples. The main player in this case can be really different. I mean, we have Philips, Samsung, but other really minor companies that produce a single sensor, such as an accelerometer or an ECG sensor or glucose sensor. The second level is actually a tier 2, the telecommunication service provider. So the one that allows through the sync to connect our sensor to transmit the data produced by our sensor to the cloud, to the net. So of course, in this case, we have at this level, I mean, we can think that in a future scenario, this level will be occupied by the main telecommunication service player, such as Nokia or Huawei, basically. On the third level, on the cloud, we have the sensor integrator, and these are exactly the one that we have seen in the slide before. And of course, on the last part, we have the care provider, and we will spend some words in a minute. Before going to the care provider, I would like to point out a fact. Actually, the sensor manufacturer, the communication provider, and the sensor integrator could be exactly the same entity. In the eHealth example we did here, actually this happened. So the sensor manufacturer is the one that provide the connectivity and also provide the sensor fusion and sensor integration services. So in reality, sensor manufacturer, the integration provider, and the sensor integrator are completely different entities. And this, I think, raises a big alarm that we will see better later. The big alarm is we need a standardization. Nowadays, most of the problem that we have in the realization of the sensor fusion, a proper sensor fusion system that is able to provide all the functionality we have seen roughly before, is not actually a technological problem, is a standardization problem. And I think that with this slide, I will be able to convince you about this. On the last part of this slide, so on the right part, I put the care provider. So the care provider, as we said, is the second customer of our services, and actually can be distinguished in 3 main blocks. The first one is actually the medical representative. So this can be the general practitioner, a private professionist, a private clinic, but these are not the only subject in this actually domain, because we can include, for example, the private health insurances that nowadays are pushing on the use of eHealth technology to, for example, have a continuous assessment of their customer. And also, for example, as we said, if we are consider a broader domain, actually sport monitoring. So we have the coaching systems for professional, or could be for people, or for general sportist people. Then we have in another field, actually, we have everything related to the emergency. So basically hospitals. Hospitals are the first that could benefit, because the patient health monitoring could be attached with an alarm system that could help the emergency to make an intervention in the quickest way as possible. Of course, we don't have to forget, for example, family and caregiver, that in many cases are the first line of caring and of the patient. So I don't want to go further on this aspect, because this is not the scope of this lecture, but I think that this slide is absolutely useful, especially for non-technical people, to really understand the real structure of a sensor integration system.